Hi, my name is Elaine Pascale, and I would like to welcome you to part one of our Unquiet Spirits event and also welcome you to Women in Horror Month. Women in Horror Month is an international grassroots initiative which encourages supporters to learn about and showcase the underrepresented work of women in the horror industries. This inclusive and positive movement is open to everyone, just as we believe the horror genre should be. When discussing contributions to the genre, one would be remiss if they did not include the recently released Unquiet Spirits. As I said in my review on Hell Notes, ghost stories shape us. They come from our culture, they're passed down throughout our families. Sometimes we inherit them when we purchase a house. The ghost stories that we tell say more about us than about the spectral main characters. But what I really value about Unquiet Spirits is that the stories are more than ghost stories. They're gorgeous sketches that are a discussion between the authors, her past self, and her struggle to understand her role in her family and her culture. I found Unquiet Spirits to be an intimate, emotional read. The book provides voice and agency to the mothers and grandmothers who have stories that must be told but were never permitted to tell them. And in this way, it's a perfect fit for Women in Horror Month. Just to wet your whistle, allow me to read the blurb from Unquiet Spirits. From hungry ghosts, vampiric babies, and shape-shifting fox spirits to the avenging white lady of urban legend, for generations, Asian women's roles have been shaped and defined through myth and story. In Unquiet Spirits, Asian writers of horror reflect on the impact of superstition, spirits, and the supernatural in this unique collection of 21 personal essays exploring themes of otherness, identity, expectation, duty, and loss, leading ultimately to understanding and empowerment. Now that I have your interest, allow me to begin introducing our authors. While the authors are reading, feel free to post comments in the comment box, and we'll have time for Q&A after. So if everyone can just mute their mics so we don't have any interruptions during the readings, I'm going to introduce our first author who'll be reading from her novel, The Ninja's Blade. Tori Eldridge is the indie-bound national best-selling author of the Lily Wong mystery thriller series, which includes The Ninja Daughter, The Ninja's Blade, and The Ninja Betrayed. She is also the author of the Brazilian horror Dance Among the Flames. Her shorter works appear in the inaugural reboot of Weird Tales magazine and numerous anthologies, including Missing on Kauai and Crime Hits Home. She was awarded the 2021 Crimson Scribe Award for Best Book of the Year and nominated for the 2019 Anthony Lefty McCavity Awards for Best First Novel. Her screenplay, The Gift, was a semi-finalist for the Academy Nickel Fellowship. Tori was born and raised in Honolulu of Hawaiian, Chinese, and Norwegian descent, and currently resides in Los Angeles, where she earned a 5th degree black belt in Toshin-Do Ninja Martial Arts. You can follow Tori on her website, which will appear in the banner while she's reading. Tori, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Elaine. Hi, everyone. As you can tell from the intro, I write in a variety of genres. My Lily Wong series, they're mystery and thrillers, but they're about a Chinese-Norwegian modern-day ninja with family issues who works with a women's shelter to protect and rescue women from violent and horrifying situations. My Brazilian horror novel, Dance Among the Flames, is about a desperate mother who rises from poverty, colorism, and abuse to become a fearsome wielder of Quimbanda black magic. So you can see feminism and social issues, empowerment, diverse cultures, and family dynamics feature very strongly in all of my work. The essay I wrote for Unquiet Spirits is called The Agency of Modern Kunoichi, The Women of Ninja, Stealth, and Perseverance. It draws from my own heritage and also my experience in the Japanese ninja martial arts. It felt so empowering for me to share these impressions and to research. I think somebody needs to mute their mic. I'm just saying. to share these impressions and to research a few key moments in the journey of women's empowerment in China and Japan. So for this reason, I thought it would be relevant to read an excerpt from The Ninja's Blade, Lily Wong, Book 2, because my ninja heroine goes undercover into the commercial sex trafficking of youth in Los Angeles. So although the genre isn't horror, the situation is horrifyingly real. He had the whole bad boy package: dark, steamy looks, ripped model bod, dismissive attitude, cock-of-the-walk swagger. No wonder Dalla and the other girls had fallen for his scam. Hot car and a thick wallet only added to his appeal. "Who's this?" he asked. "This here's Candy," Dalla said. "She's on her own." "Oh, yeah?" He checked me out from boots to hair, then circled around me for a 360 view. Dalla's expression told me not to move, even when his fingers brushed aside my hair and settled on the back of my neck. Electricity spread across my shoulders like spilled ink on a tissue, infecting my skin and marking me with his taint. It took every bit of self-control not to spin and strike. But that was me, and this was Candy. Although I'd sprained wrists for less infractions, my alter ego would allow any means to an end, especially if that end involved increased money and protection. Since Candy needed a strong pimp and already decided Manolo was the best candidate, she'd welcome his attention as a sign of promise, perhaps even triumph. I closed my eyes and sighed into his touch, giving myself over to Candy's need and fear. Those fingers tickled the back of my neck, meant safety, family, and, if Candy and I allowed ourselves to hope, maybe even love. Candy and I had a lot going on, after all. Why wouldn't Manolo want us? He might even want us so much he wouldn't want to share. When his other hand slid down my waist and pressed against my bottom into his palm. "Good stuff, right?" I said, tipping back my head so my long, silky hair could brush across his hand. Manolo slapped my ass. "Don't work me, bitch. Don't you ever work me." Dalla flashed a warning look. Candy and I didn't care. Riches went to the bold. Candy needed a new daddy, and I needed to find Emma Hughes. Neither of us could afford to play it safe. He thumped my backpack. "What's with the Pikachu?" "You know about Pokemon?" I glanced over my shoulder in genuine surprise. He turned my face back to the front. "You think I live in a hole? I know about that shit. Don't mean it's gonna fly. And what you need a backpack for, anyway? Ain't you got no place to live?" I shrugged, but didn't turn. "I do all right." "That's not what I asked." I shrugged again. Things were going well. I didn't want to ruin it by appearing too eager. Better to have him offer than for me to ask. When Manolo finished inspecting me from behind, he circled to the front and joined Dalla, draping his arm over her shoulder and twirling his finger through strands of her straightened hair. Under different circumstances, they would have made a stunning couple, an Egyptian princess and a South American king. But on this street, in this neighborhood, they looked exactly like who they were: a tough, desperate teen and a cruel, manipulative sociopath. "How long you been out of pocket?" Manolo asked. 6 months? Maybe a year? What happened to your daddy? He got shot?" Manolo nodded as if this wasn't a surprise. "I never seen you around here before." "Safer to switch hoods. I didn't want whoever offed Sammy to take it out on me." Manolo nodded again. "What track were you working?" I scuffed the gravel with my boot, buying myself a moment to recall what Josie had told me. According to her, Manolo rotated his girls in Los Angeles County: Sepulveda, Lancashire, Western. I didn't want to name a track he'd know. "Harbor," I said. "In Santa Ana. I know where HB's at. Think I don't know my business?" I bit my lip and prayed he didn't start rattling off names of pimps and girls I should know. Santa Ana was 30 miles southeast in Orange County. Please let it be far enough away. Manolo scoffed. Orange ain't worth the gas. I stay out of there. He pushed Dalla aside and sauntered toward me. So, candy, is it? Does that mean you have something sweet for me? He scooped the blonde tresses of my wig and yanked it off my head. I yelped in surprise as bobby pins flew and my hair unfolded from its bun. He laughed, pulled the squinchie, and threaded his fingers roughly through my long black hair. I like this better. His breath stank of Chilean weed. The heat of it clung to my face. He squeezed my arms, back, and my ass. Your body's tight. Goes with the whole China doll thing you got going on. That's good. Makes up for being old. Dalla shot me a cautionary look. China doll? Old? If Manolo kept squeezing me like a mango, I'd stuff my yellow, wrinkled fist right down his throat. Yeah, I work out some. Gotta have an edge, right? Manolo rubbed his stubby beard across my forehead like a cat marking his territory, then shoved me away. Here's the deal. You make the quota, you're in. If not, he stuck his finger in my face. If not, I better not see you peddling your weak-ass shit anywhere near my tracks. You feel me? Any semblance of civility vanished from his deep-set eyes, bored into mine. He had dropped the veil so I could see the beast, so I could know how little my life meant to him. But I'd already known that. What I didn't know was where to find Emma Hughes, or how to rescue her and the other children Manolo might have kidnapped or coerced into this horrible life. So that was from The Ninja's Blade. The next 3 paragraphs are from my essay in Unquiet Spirits, and they speak to why I read the previous excerpt and why I wrote The Agency of Modern Kunoichi, The Women of Ninja Stealth and Perseverance. The lives of Asian women have, and to some extent continue to be, shrouded in female diminishing limitations, expectations, and stereotypes. We are seen as pliable, accommodating, and self-effacing, women who understand their place and will put up with unpleasant conditions out of duty and obligation. Women who persevere, often in stealth or behind the scenes. Although my white American father taught me to speak out and expect equality from men, the relationship with my Chinese Hawaiian mother reflected ingrained perceptions and attitudes he wouldn't have recognized or probably been able to admit. The same could be said for my mother, who was far more Chinese in her thinking than she ever would believe. While she hid her resentments behind a gracious facade, her true feelings erupted in bursts of anger and more typically through inscrutable silence. It wasn't until my adulthood that I realized the cultural significance of her grudging acceptance for the path her life had taken. Whether in truth or only in her perception, she had subordinated her will and dreams to a man. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Tori. That was wonderful. And now I need to read The Ninja's Blade. I'm really interested in that. Our next author is Genevieve Flynn. Genevieve Flynn is Chinese, born in Malaysia, but she now calls Australia home. She's a 2-time Bram Stoker Award and Shirley Jackson Award winning fiction editor, author, and poet. Her works have been nominated and shortlisted for the British Fantasy, Ditmar, Aurealis, Australian Shadows, Elgin, and Riesling Awards, and the Pushcart Prize. She is a recipient of the 2022 Queensland Writers Fellowship. Genevieve is the co-editor, along with Lee Murray, of Black Crane's Tales of Unquiet Women, and she is a poetry contributor to Tortured Willows, Bent, Bowed, Unbroken. And you can follow Genevieve at her website, which will appear in the banner. So Genevieve, please take it away.
Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to read from my essay, Some Things Are Dangerous But Can Be Lived With, the Ghost Baby of Malaysian Mythology. It was one of the hardest things I've ever written, and I was terrified of how it would affect my mother. We eventually came to work on the essay together, and I hope it has helped her to reframe some of the cruel moments of her upbringing. I've never met my Aunt Rosemary. She died when my mother was only 4 or 5 years old, but her spirit has laid its delicate, restless touch on my life. Her story, her Quikia's voice, will continue to echo through the generations that follow. According to Southeast Asian law, a Quikia is a creature made from the spirit of a deceased human fetus, often aborted or stillborn. Brought to life by a bomo, a Malaysian shaman, through black magic, a Quikia is usually the size of a toddler, with a large head, red or black clouded eyes, pointed ears, fanged teeth, long nails, and green or grey skin. The creature is kept in a jar and must be fed with blood, either through breastfeeding or from the fingers or toes of its keeper. Despite its ghastly origin and description, the Quikia is relatively harmless and is only used by its owner to steal or cause mischief. However, under the direction of a malevolent or neglectful master, a Quikia can become monstrous, and any riches gained will be at great personal cost. The ghost child is often passed from generation to generation and may grow stronger over time. Once created, it can be difficult to destroy. In my short story, Little Worm, which is the final entry in the award-winning anthology Black Cranes, I don't know if we can see it with my green screen, Tales of Unquiet Women, I adopted the myth of the Quikia to represent the suppressed hopes and ambitions of the protagonists, Teresa's mother. I amplified the hereditary and vampiric nature of the ghost child to personify the trauma and lessons we learned from generations past. The Quikia became the embodiment of an unquiet phantom, something that is passed down from generation to generation, beginning with trauma, morphing and shaped by each age, and which can never be discarded. My mother has told tales of her childhood, her experiences as a daughter, wife, and mother, and the death of her older sister. However, these retellings seem to be fragments of a whole, and I wanted to trace the entire narrative, to follow the tendrils that lead back to the formation of my family's Quikia, and examine how this urban ghost story could be adapted to interrogate generational trauma. Rosemary. Aunt Rosemary was 20 years older than my mother, and the oldest of 4 children. Rosemary was absent for much of my mother's early childhood, as she went to boarding school, then earned a scholarship to study medicine in Australia. My mother only ever remembers seeing her once, on Rosemary's wedding day, when, as a young child, my mother helped her to get dressed for the occasion. In most ways, the sisters were strangers. Rosemary returned to Malaysia and married a young doctor, Tujun Swan, and they moved away from her hometown for his training. He was afforded a small bedsit as part of his internship, and being only one of around 60 doctors in the whole of Malay at the time, he was on call most nights. Believing that the tiny room was no place for his new bride, my uncle sent Rosemary to live with his father and his father's wives. The months after marriage can be some of the hardest for a new bride in traditional Chinese society. Sons have an unbroken sense of belonging in the family. They will continue the family name, remain in the family home, and inherit the family assets. They will also have the weight of preserving the family honor and status. Daughters, on the other hand, are viewed as extra mouths to feed until they are married off. When a wife enters her new family, she is often deemed a threat to the bond between mother-in-law and son. The wife only gains a true sense of belonging when she creates her uterine family, her children. Her status rises if and when she is able to produce sons. Rosemary never felt part of the family. She was sometimes mistreated, and her husband's family spoke a different dialect to her own. She and Tujun Swan clashed many times about her placement. Desperately isolated and homesick, she asked her parents to visit. They declined, but bought her a car so she could drive back and forth to see her husband. One night after a party, only a few months after they were married, Rosemary and Tujen Swan argued terribly. Distraught, she drove off into the night. She needed glasses for driving, but for some reason was not wearing them. The road forked around a large tree. On one side was the Catholic cemetery. On the other, the Christian graveyard. Rosemary crashed headlong into the trunk, crushing the bonnet 4 feet and severing both her legs. Witnesses say tears were on her face when she died. In a cruel turn of fate, her husband, the only doctor in the area, was called to attend. Like the death necessary for the creation of the Guikia, my Aunt Rosemary's story was a life cut short. Christine. My grandmother, Christine, wept and refused to leave her bed for a week. She began to smoke and gamble heavily, often playing mahjong with friends for several days and nights at a time. She would hurriedly cook for the morning, then return after dark, leaving my mother to prepare the evening meal. The happy family atmosphere was fractured, and nobody was allowed to speak ill of Rosemary, nor even utter her name. All the photos of her were removed, and there was no commemorative shrine. My grandmother did not attend Rosemary's funeral. The eldest surviving child, Ronald, was at boarding school. The remaining children, David, the second son, and my mother, the youngest, were still living at home and required care. My grandparents doted on David and nursed him for his health issues. But my grandmother, who was already somewhat distant, became cold and neglectful toward my mother. Now, my mother bears an uncanny resemblance to Rosemary. She looks, speaks, and walks just like my aunt did, and her name is Rosalind. As a young woman, she was often mistaken for her sister. After my aunt's death, friends and family would accidentally call my mother by her sister's name, sending my grandmother into a fury. My grandmother fought with my grandfather to move away from their home to escape. The family would move several times before finally settling. After my grandfather passed away in 2003, my mother found a small tin box while sorting through his belongings. She had never seen it before. It was something my grandmother had hidden away. Inside were the missing photos of Rosemary. Although my grandmother never brought out the box of photos and would say she had 3 children, never 4 and 1 who had died, the box survived every relocation. My grandmother had created a form for the Guikia. And that's the end of my section. If you want to find out how the Guikia plays through my family, you'll have to buy the book.
Thank you. I mean, didn't I say these are emotional reads? They're wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Our next reader is Ai Zhang. She's a Chinese-Canadian writer and an immigrant from Fujian. She's a member of Horror Writer Association, Science Fiction Writer Association, and Codex. She's an alumnus of the University of Toronto Humber School for Writers and the University of Edinburgh. Her work can be found in SF, The Dark, and Uncanny, among others. She is the recipient of Odyssey Workshop's 2022 Fresh Voices Scholarship and the author of Lingjun. And as you'll be able to see in the banner when I get her in the studio, you will see that she can be found on Twitter and she can also be found online. So I take it away.
Hello. So I thought a lot about the idea of ghosts and spirits, both before writing the essay, but especially after the essay was done. And I was thinking about how most of the women in my family are kind of like wandering spirits. You'll never know what is amiss until their presence is gone. And you'll never acknowledge your presence until a mistake has been made, until the spirit becomes the center of blame, sometimes by men, sometimes by fellow women, and most heartbreakingly by the children, all with the notion that spirits must be ethereal, doting, quiet, perfect. But in writing this essay, I realized that just like women, the men in my family are also like spirits too, the shadowy breadwinners in the background, and sometimes too busy to spend any time with their children, sometimes forgotten. and yet they often carry the weight of the family upon their shoulders, hold wheels within their bodies, as silent ghosts who keep pushing forward because they're plagued by duty, just as the women are, and even the children too. Sometimes we become those very ghosts. So here's the selection from my essay in Unquiet Spirits on motherhood. In late 2021, after an argument with my husband, my sister clutched at my arms in the washroom as I sat in a heaping mess on the floor. She was hugging me. I was hugging myself. Hugs were too awkward, at least for me with my family. This was an embrace of sorts. It felt comforting, but it also felt alien. My sister was born in Canada 5 years after I was born in China. She did most of the hugging in the family, outside of her spontaneous and cringy, though I appreciate it much more now, embrace. I don't remember what it feels like to hug anyone in my family. In this moment, both cradled and caged within my younger sister's arms, I sat on the floor, yelling, "Why me?" My sister's voice blurred with my wails. "I'll do it. I'll have the children." To which I responded, "It would be too late." Not having children was not an option, though I'd like to think I'm making headway in changing this mindset. Yet there is still a long way to go. But why must it be like this? My aunt called me later that night, asking me if it was true that I said I didn't want children, and insisting that I must, that it's my duty, that it's what life is all about. I told her that many of my friends had similar thoughts as me, many women who choose not to have children. Not all of us are meant for children, after all, and we shouldn't have to have them just because we're women. It felt like a slap in the face when my aunt questioned the nature of my friends, the one who don't want kids, calling them monsters and unnatural and unhinged. It was then when I realized nothing would make my relatives happy unless I became more or less like them. In high school, I found my bedroom crying. There really is something about women in domestic spaces. For the first time in my life, she lashed out at me with words, with such viciousness I didn't realize was possible coming from her fragile bird-like frame, replacing her usual kindness and patience. She yelled, "Why do I have to go through this? I want to move out. Can't you just be better? Why does no one understand me? How could she, my father's mother, also a mother, not understand me? Why is everyone against me?" And in unspoken silence, why can I not leave? Because she is a mother. I haven't seen another instance of this explosion of emotions, but recently, in a quiet whisper, my mother told me, "I am a little hotel." I wrote a poem in the middle of that night, with those words as the title, highlighting the violence, the enduring nature of motherhood. And as selfish as it may sound, I realize I do not want to be a mother. But my mother, to me, is a hero. To show such love, even when it seems she receives barely half in return. I cannot imagine anyone stronger than a mother. A selection from I Am a Little Hotel. But sometimes even I forget that beneath withered, wrinkled, time-stamped hands, there was once a woman who loved her guests, those who entered and left, those who stood guard at the door until my floors became empty, and the only reminder of my guests are their footprints, first muddy, then dried dirt sewn across my carpets, and greasy handprints along the walls. And no matter how hard I scrub, they don't leave unless I rip out the wallpapers. But even then, I cannot escape because I am a little hotel. And that is all. And I hope the collection brings hope to the Unquiet Spirits who believe there is none. Thank you.
Wonderful. These selections are just so personal and so intimate, and y'all are so brave for sharing them. I appreciate it. It just gives me chills listening to you read them. Our next reader is Gabriella Lee. She teaches creative writing and children's literature at the Department of English and Comparative Literature at the University of the Philippines. Her fiction has been published in the Philippines and abroad, most recently in the Bram Stoker award-winning anthology, Black Crane's Tales of Unquiet Women. She received the 2019 PBBY Salonga Grand Prize which was published as the picture book Seeley's Crocodile, the story and art of Araceli Limcanco Dance. She recently contributed the chapter Digital Liminality and Identities in Philippine Young Adult Speculative Fiction to Asian Children's Literature and Film in a Global Age, Local, National, and Transnational Trajectories, edited by Sharmani Gabriel and Bernard Wilson. So, Gabriella, please begin.
So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my essay titled Sightings from Unquiet Spirits. Um, this essay was written partially when I was moving here to the US for my PhD, um, and like navigating this weird space where I was seen not as a Filipino but as an Asian woman, and like the baggage that carries, especially in the wake of violence against Asian women in the United States that is still ongoing at this point in time. And tying that with my interest in the Gothic and in hauntings in particular. So I'm reading two short sections from this essay. So um, I'll start. So one of the most famous hauntings in Manila is the legend of the White Lady of Balete Drive. White Lady stories were pretty common urban legends, especially if you attended a Catholic girls' school, which I did. There were always ghost stories that proliferated by word of mouth from a friend of a friend of a friend. In third grade, one of my classmates proceeded to tell us that the canteen bathroom, which was located at the dark corner of that cavernous building, was haunted by a white lady, the ghost of a nun who had hung herself in one of the stalls. Another classmate contradicted her. The canteen bathrooms were haunted by a nun who was murdered by the Japanese troops during World War II, which was why we could hear the echoes of her voice in the bathroom. And yet another version, this time shared by an older student, said that the nun was killed trying to protect the students from the soldiers who wanted to rape them, and that the prayers she muttered turned into screams if you stayed in the bathroom long enough. Of course, we all gasped at that version. Murder was one thing, but rape? Well, our minds couldn't comprehend that. Not yet. White ladies are usually the ghosts of women, pure and virginal, who die under the most horrific of circumstances. But the White Lady of Balete Drive seemed to have made that strip of residential road her home. Some stories say that she was a young woman who was violated by Japanese soldiers, as the stories go. Others say she was murdered by a jealous lover. And yet others say she was raped and left for dead by an evil cab driver. Whatever the case may be, she was always violently assaulted and then discarded. But this is the most common variation of the story that I know. One night, and it's always night in these stories, an empty taxicab stops to pick up a passenger. It's a young woman in an elegant dress that enters his vehicle. She gives her address on Balete Drive. She's unusually beautiful, almost ethereal. The driver complies and tries to make small talk with his passenger as she sits in the back. Sometimes people say that she replies, while other times they say that she's just silent. As the cab moves down Balete Drive, the cab driver senses that something is amiss. Sometimes the woman is just no longer in the back seat, while other times the driver sees her bloodied and bruised, her mouth open in a soundless scream. Usually, the driver hightails it out of there with a story to tell his friends the next day. In fact, the White Lady of Balete Drive was common enough that local ghost hunters would frequent the street to look for signs of her, disturbing the residents. Balete Drive itself is located in a more genteel part of Quezon City in the northern part of Metro Manila. My grandparents' house, where we had Sunday dinners regularly with my maternal extended family, was actually near Balete Drive. And so sometimes, whenever traffic along major thoroughfares became too bad, our cab drivers would take a shortcut down the street. When I was younger, I would always squint hard to see if there were any ghosts hiding behind the trees that lined both sides of the road. It seemed to me that the street was always different to the adjacent streets. The trees created a canopy, blocking out most of the sunlight. And the houses, well, mansions really, were behind high cement walls or elaborate gates that allowed a peek into their crumbling, ruined glory. Some of the homes even had actual balete trees, old and gnarled and draped with ropey vines growing behind these walls. In Philippine mythology, the balete tree is a favorite hiding spot for many creatures in our folk tales. It houses the cigar smoking giant known as the capre in its branches, as well as the trickster tikbalang who enjoys making travelers lose their way. The dwarfish Nuno sa Punso makes its home inside the mounds of soil between the massive roots, while the eel-like batibat spirits sleep inside its hollow trunk. To me, it made sense that if you were going to haunt a particular place, you might want to stay close to a place with a lot of balete trees. I understood the need to stay close to a place you might have favored in real life, of wanting to be near the place you felt most at home. The idea of a haunting, of spirits remaining bound to a physical place, is more than just a horror trope. In classic Gothic literature, for instance, the haunting of a place or a person is usually a sign of guilt in the character, of some horrid past they could not escape. The home is always a haunted place in many ghost stories. Haunted characters harbored some deep, dark secret that is only revealed at the end of the story. In all of these stories, characters are haunted usually by misdeeds, which eventually result in consequences that affect their lives. Read within a historical context, the Gothic tradition can also be read as kind of a haunting of history. When reading these stories, I always think of ghosts and their places of haunting not as something that is necessarily fearful, but a hidden melancholy that is only uncovered when the whole truth is revealed. The many truths of the White Lady of Balete Drive also show up in various stories plucked by writers in the Philippines. For example, in Dean Francis Alfar's A Field Guide to the Roads of Manila, the personification of Balete Drive speaks about the spirit that still haunts this road. Similarly, in the Trece series of comics created in 2005 by Budget Tan and Cadro Baldissimo, the White Lady is a presence that continuously haunts Balete Drive, specifically the intersection between Balete and 13th Street, which is an actual street that intersects with the actual Balete Drive. In their story, the White Lady is made corporeal and murdered a second time, and by the end of the narrative, another spirit has taken her place, implying that there has always been something haunting that street. But perhaps my favorite version of the White Lady of Balete Drive has to be Nick Joaquin's surreal pastiche of a children's story titled The Mystery Sleeper of Balete Drive, which was written in 1983. Elements of the Snow White fairy tale are woven together with elements of the urban legend. And here, the character of Blanca, who is both Snow White and White Lady, is both haunted and haunting. She is haunted by the magical curse that made her an orphan, and in turn, she haunts the dreams of the men who love her. Like many of Nick Joaquin's stories for children, the mystery sleeper borrows from Philippine folk beliefs but twists the story to make an incisive commentary on contemporary social and cultural issues. It is also interesting to me that it is usually women who haunt the home, passively hidden in the shadowy closets and abandoned attics of a house, silent and present, as if waiting for another person to simply listen to them, to allow them the grace to be at peace. Ghosts are never about what the spirit had done while she was alive. It is always about what was done to her while she was alive, and how that violence and that injustice tethers her to the world of the living, even though she is already dead. Thank you very much for listening.
Wonderful. And some wonderful points. And despite the wonderful points you made, I want you to come to my next campfire and tell me some White Lady stories. I love a good urban legend. Now, last but certainly not least, Yvette Tan is one of the Philippines' most celebrated horror writers. Aside from short fiction collections in English and Tagalog, she's written a feature film that received nationwide release. And she also co-wrote a libretto for a ballet that was performed by Ballet Philippines on the main stage of the Cultural Center of the Philippines. She was the official scribe of the Manila Bienal in 2018, and her story was the companion piece to the artwork that adorned the Philippines Pavilion in the 2021 Frankfurt Book Fair. She co-hosted Trees After Dark, the behind-the-scenes companion to the Netflix hit anime Trees. She is a creative consultant to a Filipino game inspired by the country's mythical creatures. Her works have been translated into Spanish, Czech, and Hungarian, and you can follow her on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So Yvette, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for tuning in. So, I will be reading from my essay, Fallen Leaves, New Soil, which appears in the anthology. It's about how I use folklore and the supernatural to make sense of the world, and how, as a Chinese Filipino, um, because of my lack of exposure to Chinese superstitions and supernatural beliefs, and at the same time, my exposure to Filipino ones, um, use the supernatural to make sense of the world and how I feel more at home with my Filipino side. So here it is: Fallen Leaves, New Soil. Behind every haunting is a story of heartbreak. I am a Filipino woman of Chinese descent. My paternal grandparents and my maternal grandmother all hail from the same tiny island in Fujian, China, and my maternal grandmother is from Bulacan, Philippines. My father's parents raised their children in as a Western as a way as possible. And as far as I can tell, my mother and her siblings were raised with a mix of Filipino and localized Chinese customs. To this day, I find it hard to fully relate to my Chinese side since we weren't raised in the traditional way, unless it involved something unpleasant, mostly customs we didn't understand and couldn't be given a proper explanation for, or Chinese medicine, which tended to taste awful. I accidentally found a way to connect with my Filipino roots, however, and that was through the supernatural. The thing about growing up under a dictatorial government, which the Philippines was under from 1972 to 1986, is that mass media is regulated under pain of, well, death, among other things. This meant that only news that put the administration in good light could be reported. A side effect of this is that the bad news gets out anyway, and since it isn't reported in legitimate news sources, which people tend not to trust anyway because of their bias towards the government, bad news tends to take a life. Bad news tended to take a life. Bad news tends to take lives of their own. They became gossip, which morphed into whispered warnings, and sometimes these warnings turned into urban legends. I was a quiet kid, which meant I got to eavesdrop on a lot of adult conversations. And in what seemed like specifically an 80s thing or my brain homing in on interesting things, but there was no line between gossip about real people and stories that involved the supernatural. For example, after a trip to an uncle's farm, my sister's nanny shared some gossip she heard from the farmhands of the chickens dying because they were being eaten by tikbalang, which is a lower mythological creature made up of a human body and a horse's head. In hindsight, the farmhands could have been telling tall tales about natural chicken deaths, or they could have been stealing the chickens, who knows? But there are more logically carnivorous monsters to choose from than the tikbalang. This also extended to mass media, despite the previously mentioned bias towards the government. There was a huge popular celebrity show at the time where the host would present supernatural happenings around the country as legitimate news stories in between reports of the latest showbiz scandal. She had stories like "Woman gives birth to fish," complete with the interview with the said woman beside her fish child swimming in a basin on video. And there were urban legends. The one I remember the most and have used in my fiction is how parents would tell their children not to go out at night because they would be kidnapped and sacrificed to appease the elementals in construction sites. This is a common practice in many cultures where a live creature is killed or walled into a structure to ensure its strength. The practice survives in the Philippines in the tradition of killing a chicken and letting its blood drip on a site before construction begins. The urban legend behind this was that when the dictator built a bridge across a strait, some construction materials fell into the water and killed a water elemental, whose parents cursed the First Lady so she grew scales. It was determined that the only way to appease the spirits was to sacrifice children to it, so children began disappearing and the First Lady was cured. On one hand, this could be a way for parents to keep their children indoors at night. The dangers back then were certainly very real and were scarier than any ghost story. People did disappear in the night, their bodies usually found dumped in a nearby field. The term for it was salvage. So when you say a man was salvaged, it meant a man was abducted and killed and his body was dumped in a random spot. The bridge was constructed in 1972 before I was born, and I heard that story in the early 80s in Manila, far from the province it was said to have happened in, which is a testament to how long the tale survived and how far it traveled. The Philippines also has a vibrant film industry in the 80s, and this included horror movies. My mother never took us to horror movies, and I would have been too scared to watch anyway. But I got exposed to them through TV commercials. This is how I got exposed to that previously unknown Tiana, which was traditionally a goblin who takes the form of a newborn baby to lure unsuspecting people into its clutches, and the totally made up Undin, derived from an amalgamation of characteristics of water elementals and, of course, the ubiquitous White Lady. The 80s also gave rise to one of the most famous urban legends in the Philippines, the tale of the White Lady of Balete Drive. She's said to be the spirit of a woman who was raped and killed, her body dumped on a street called Balete Drive, named after the balete or banyan trees that used to grow in the area. She was said to hail taxis, have them take them to a house in the area, go inside to get money for payment, then never come out. The taxi driver would eventually knock on the door of the house, only to find that his passenger had been dead for a long time. This story was later debunked when a journalist admitted to making up the whole thing on a slow news day. I remember watching this interview on TV as a kid, but can't find evidence of it online. I'm still looking for it though. I was scared of the supernatural, but at the same time also deeply fascinated by it. This is why Filipino folklore influences so much of my writing, because it encompasses real life to an extent, and also why I don't write about Chinese ghosts, because I've never experienced them. And I don't mean an actual encounter with an entity, but the act of listening to how others have reacted to them in real life. So if you follow, that's the end of my essay. Um, if you follow Philippine politics, this essay was written before the last presidential elections, and now the son of the mentioned dictator is the current president of the Philippines. So I wonder if this will spur another increase in urban legends. I tend to inject the supernatural with whatever piques my interest at the moment. And at one time, it was mail order brides. So I'm going to read Siki Horror, the story that shares its title with my second collection. It's about an American who buys a mail order bride from a Filipino website and realizes that he got more than the meek, subservient, exotic servant that he expected. So, an excerpt from Siki Horror. The name of the website was misleading. That was the first thing Foster realized. The women on the site didn't look like whores. Beautiful, all of them, with smooth brown skin and big, gorgeous eyes framed demurely by a curtain of dark lashes and soft lips that invited you into their long, slender arms. Their headshots, though inexpertly done, looked more like model name cards than ID pictures. Their full body shots had them in tank tops and miniskirts or hot pants, indulging in domestic duties like cooking and cleaning and doing the laundry. It would have been absolutely ridiculous if the girls weren't so hot. The site was written in substandard but passable English, with women grouped according to their domestic specialty: cooking, housekeeping, laundry, and so forth. Foster studied their profiles, wondering if he should pick Nora, who loved to clean house, or Vilma, who was first in her high school English class, or Gloria, who loved to laundry, if only because the statement made him laugh. He was beginning to call the whole thing off, to chalk it up to a silly disconnect in his brain when he happened on Luli, the perfect girl. He didn't know what it was that made her stand out, that drew him to her. Maybe it was the mischievous twinkle in her eyes, or the slight upturn of her mouth that made it look like she was neither smiling nor frowning, or her sweet, innocent face that made it look like she needed saving. In her full body picture, she was bending down against an open oven, caught in the act of bringing out a Thanksgiving turkey. Foster felt his pants tighten. Her shorts were so tiny you could see the lower part of her ass, while her low-cut tank top showed off her ample cleavage, which despite the downward angle seemed to defy gravity. The turkey she held in her hands was plump and perfectly brown. Foster could almost see the juices bursting from inside, its stuffing cooked just right, something to truly give thanks for. Luli listed her talents as cooking and singing and her interests as learning new recipes. Before he knew it, Foster was clicking on the Marry Me button under the picture and was inputting his credit card number into the processing form. She didn't come cheap, but overall, he spent less than what he expected, especially on her travel expenses. He was told that his transaction was a success and that he should be expecting his first shipment in 3 to 6 weeks or after the papers were processed, whichever came first. Foster did a double take. Did he just get conned into spending 3 months' salary for a blow-up doll? Or maybe they were going to ship her stuff first and then have her come by plane later. Or did they treat the women so much like stock that they actually referred to them that way? And what did first shipment mean? Was there a second? A third? Did she have so much stuff that they couldn't fit it on a plane? Foster needed to know, but he didn't want to come off like a fool. In the end, he swallowed his pride and asked Donovan about it. That's right, Donovan said when asked about the packages. It's like some miracle of science. That's why the shipping cost is so low. Foster pressed further. I don't want to spoil it for you, man. Donovan grinned. Only don't fucking freak out, and oh, just add water. Foster spent half of the next 3 weeks in excitement over Luli's arrival and the other half in jealousy over Donovan and his daily lunches. On Monday, it was a giant pastrami sandwich with Cobb salad and a peach. Tuesday, it was a greasy, heart-stopping sloppy joe with home fries and homemade applesauce. Wednesday, it was a Caesar salad sub with oversized homemade chocolate chips. By Thursday, Foster had taken to staying longer in the cafeteria so he wouldn't have to be tortured by the sight of Donovan munching on his appetizing meals made by his appetizing wife. Week 1. The first package came early, 19 days after Foster had clicked Marry Me. It was long and thin and labeled fragile. At first, he thought it was from someone else, like his mother maybe, or that it had been sent to him by mistake. But it had his name and address on it, as well as the SikiHorbrides.com logo and a stylized head wearing a veil, but no name or address. He opened the package, his hands trembling in anticipation. And then he began to scream. It was a leg, a human leg. A woman's right leg and foot, her toenails clipped short and painted bright red. Foster held it in his hands, not knowing what to do. And then it flexed. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your fiction. I'm going to now open it up so that we're all back kind of on stage. We don't have a lot of time left, but if anybody would like to put a question in the comment box, or if any of our authors have a final thought. I have some thoughts, but I've done enough talking already. So I wanted to allow, there've been comments in our comment box, a lot of praise, a lot of people enjoying the readings, but I don't know if anyone had any questions or any comments from either the audience or our authors.
I want to know what's in the second package. I want to find out. Was it a matching
The
leg?
book's available on Amazon. You can read it.
Have to grab
I can
that
answer
one.
it here if you want, though.
No, don't spoil it.
Yeah, no spoilers.
No spoilers. Gotta buy the book.
I'd like to mention how great it was to work with Lee Murray and Angela Eureka Smith. They're our editors. I really, when I was invited into this, I was like, I don't know. And she's like, but the mysticism of the ninja and the kunoichi, I'm like, oh, okay, I got a handle of that, But even then, it was just the whole personal essay, the angle of it. They were so very helpful in their guidance and just bringing out. It turned into a very special experience. So, shout out to them. Thank you so much.
Yeah, they're both wonderful. And that special experience really shines through when you're reading the book. I was just captivated by the book and by the uniqueness of the setup of it. It's wonderful. I recommend it to everybody, especially in Women in Horror Month. Buy it. If you don't own it, you need to. Okay, there is a question from Angela. She says, I feel like I know this answer, but how did writing this essay change or not change your image of yourself as members of the Asian diaspora? Anyone want to address that?
I kind of feel less alone reading everyone's essays, and we're all different. We're not. I think that challenges the idea of the monolithic Asian. We're all the conscientious and demure girls, but reading everyone's essays and realizing there's a lot of similarities, and we're all kind of struggling with that push and pull between who we are, what's expected of us, and for a lot of us, the differences in culture that we come from and that we've moved to. I think being able to share that experience, I think I feel much less alone as part of the Asian diaspora. Anyone else?
Funny, the flip side of that is I don't feel less alone. I feel more a part of a community.
Yes.
Kind of the same, but different.
Definitely. Yes. Yeah, definitely. And there is much, like a real sense of sisterhood. Like we call each other the Unquiet Sisters, and it's more than a catchphrase. I think it is a genuine feeling of community, and that we're part of something much bigger than individually. I think with Black Cranes and Tortured Willows and now Unquiet Spirits, and all the projects that everyone's involved in. I think pushing those boundaries that might have been around Asian horror or Asian women's writing. I think that's been really, really exciting as part of this project.
Great answers. Great answers. I'm wondering what my question is. So when's like the sequel or part 2 going to be out? Because this seems to me your trajectory of trying to, it seems like a lot of you tried to better understand your mothers, try to better understand your grandmothers. And that's an ongoing process. That doesn't just like, oh, now I've got the answer, right? It's continuing to go in that evolution. So I feel like there'll need to be at some point a circle back so we find out what you're thinking what you're thinking 5 years down the road, what you're thinking 10 years down the road. We do have just a few moments left, just a few minutes. Does anyone have any final thoughts?
Does anyone want to?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Does anyone want to mention what they're writing now or what they've got coming
up that they want to promote? Let's start. Tori, do you have anything coming up that you want to promote for us?
Actually, they just made the announcement. The 4th Lily Wong novel, The Ninja's Oath, is going to be released in hardback on September 12th. And I'm especially excited about this because it's kind of the epic conclusion to the 4-book set. And it starts in Shanghai, where my son lived and his wife for 5 years, and my granddaughter was born. And it moves to Osaka in obviously Japan, where my parents met and married in Japan, and both of my sisters were born there. So it was a very special location on top of all the, ninja activity that goes on.
Awesome. Genevieve, do you have anything you would like to promote?
I'm currently writing, I do keep promising this, and Lee keeps saying, hurry up. I'm writing my historical horror novel based on the most successful pirate of all time, Qing Shi. And that's been a lot of fun, just reading her story and just discovering who she was. And there isn't that much information on her early years. So that's where I'm playing around a lot. So that's going to be coming. That's hopefully be finished by the end of the year. Then Lee can stop harassing me.
Perfect. How about you? Do you have anything you would like to promote? Anything coming up?
On April 4th, my very haunted house story, Linghuan, is coming out, filled with unquiet spirits, I guess you could say, in the form of the living. So keep an eye out for that.
And we will keep an eye out for it. Gabriella, what about you?
My second short story collection came out earlier this year. It's called uh oh gosh, I can't even remember the title of my own book. Um sorry. I'm so nervous right now. I'm just like, what am I talking about? Sorry.
That's okay.
It's called A Playlist for the End of the World. And it's available through the University of the Philippines Press. And I'm also coming out along with a co-editor, a book titled Mapping New Stars, which is a source book for Philippine speculative fiction. And we hope to have that book out this year. Yvette is one of our contributors, and we're very grateful for her work on like Philippine horror, which she wrote the chapter on.
Awesome. Yvette, what would you like to promote?
Um, like Gabby, my second collection also just came out this year, and it recently became it recently got uploaded on as an ebook in all the places you can get ebooks in. So it's called Siki Horror and Other Stories. It's got the story that I read from earlier. So I hope you guys check it out.
We certainly will. And I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, both our readers and our audience. There will be a part 2 next Friday, same time. So feel free to join again. Please follow our authors on their websites that were put up. And we'll have a recording of this later so you can share it with your friends and family or anyone who has missed it. So again, thank you so much. Please celebrate Women in Horror Month. Watch some films directed by women directors. Read some books by women authors. And enjoy the rest of your evening or day, depending on where you are.